Nestled deep in the forest, the Kingdom of Benin was one of the eldest and most developed states in West Africa and a powerful pre-colonial capital. Dating back to the 1200s, the people of Edo, which is now found in southern Nigeria, founded Benin. It's an architectural masterpiece, enclosed by big earthen walls and the deepest of ditches. The walls of Benin City and the surrounding kingdom is the world's largest earthworks prior to the mechanical era and were at one point 4 times larger than the Great Wall of China, consuming over 100 times more materials than the Great Pyramids. It extended for some 16,000 kilometers in all, in a mosaic of more than 500 interconnected settlement boundaries. They covered 6,500 square meters and were all dug by the Edo people. They took an estimated 150 million hours of digging to construct and are perhaps the largest single archaeological phenomenon in the planet, and barely a trace exists today. Benin, of course, was at the heart of the Benin Empire. Benin was a swirling mass of architectural achievements. Its design was based on a complex mathematical formula known as fractals, which is part of the indigenous knowledge system that is found mainly in Africa. When researchers in the 1980s began seeing fractal designs in African communities through satellite imagery, they began to grasp how integral and inherent geometric patterning was to a large swathe of African civilizations. Fractal use was widespread, but there's not a lot of evidence that groups that use fractal designs came across each other. Many other societies in Africa and around the world are more accustomed to Euclidean geometry. While fractals are irregular and random patterns, Euclidean shapes such as the pyramids of Giza are simple geometrics compared to fractal patterning, with a defined set of rules or formulas that can be easily used to create different geometric forms. Being a medieval city with little outside influence, fractals informed a large part of Edo's culture, religion, and art. Fractals are ruled by symmetry, proportionality, and repetition. Self-similarity are also an important property, where the shape of the whole geometry is the same as its constituent parts. To help visualize this point, think of a tree. The branches and the branches are of a similar shape to the tree as a whole. The city and its 500 surrounding villages were purposely laid out to form perfect fractals, with similar shapes repeated in the homes of each house and the house itself, and the clusters of villages in the house in a mathematically predictable pattern. Family houses were divided again into 3 sections. The central part were the husband's quarters, looking towards the road. To the left, the wives' quarters, and to the right, the young men's quarters. Fractals also held a socio-political value, with children learning to be people by watching their parents, and the king's palace standing in the centre of the city, with the 11 chiefs' palaces standing on radial roads, joined by smaller arteries. Now let's take a look at the design of the city. It was described as one of the most planned and best run cities and got stellar reviews from anyone who visited. The city was beautifully designed with a series of compounds containing accommodation, workshops and public buildings with interconnecting doors and passageways. At the centre of the city was the King's Court, with 30 straight, broad streets, each 120 feet wide, placed at right angles to each other. The city was covered in art, with exterior walls decorated with ridged designs. There were clay carving portraying animals, patterns, and strong sunlight, and pillars covered in bronze, illustrating the victories and deeds of former kings and nobles. When Europeans first came to Africa, they considered the architecture very disorganized and thus primitive. It never occurred to them that Africans might have been using a form of mathematics that they hadn't even discovered yet. Houses are built alongside the streets in good order, in one close to the other, writes 17th century Dutch visitor Olaf Dapper. Adorned with gables and steps, they are usually broad with long galleries inside, especially so in the case of the house of the nobility, divided into many rooms, which are separated by walls made of red clay and very well erected. Urban planning in the Kingdom of Benin. The city was divided into quarters, with each inhabited by different guilds or social groups, including artisans, warriors, and traders. Streets were laid out in a regular pattern, with the main roads leading towards the royal palace, which sat in the centre of the city. There was solid infrastructure. It was one of the first cities to have street lighting, with metal lamps built around the city, keeping the streets alight with palm oil. There was an extensive network of roads and pathways, which were paved with clay and sand. Main roads were wide and well maintained, and were used for trade and communication within the kingdom. The moats and ditches surrounding the city were not only for defence but also helped to manage rainwater and prevent flooding, ensuring the city remained inhabitable during the rainy season. The city was zoned according to its function and was split into 11 divisions, each a smaller replication of the king's court, designed in Edo's unique fractals, which shaped their society. Marketplaces were strategically located throughout the city, serving as important economic hubs for trade. These markets facilitated both local trade and commerce with foreign traders, particularly the Portuguese, who began arriving in the 15th century. The markets offered a wide range of goods from agricultural produce, craft, textiles, and artworks. The wealth generated from these markets contributed to the kingdom's prosperity and allowed it to maintain its architectural and urban grandeur. But all roads lead to heaven. The central area was reserved for the Ober's place and the residents of the nobility, whilst the outer areas were occupied by commoners, craftsmen, and traders. The zoning reflected the hierarchical nature of Benin society. The royal palace and compounds were at the heart of Benin City. The royal palace, a vast complex that served as the residence of the Oba, the king. The palace was surrounded by high walls and was divided into courtyards, each serving ceremonial, administrative, and residential purposes. The architecture and urban planning of the Kingdom of Benin was deeply intertwined with its cultural and religious beliefs. The city's layout, the grandeur of the Oba's palace, and the artworks all served to reinforce the divine authority of the Oba and the unity of the kingdom. The emphasis on order, hierarchy, and artistic expression in the city's design reflected the values and social structure of the Benin people. Benin's architecture and urban planning is a reminder of the sophisticated and advanced nature of West African civilizations before colonialism, challenging outdated narratives that often overlook the continent's contributions to global history. Benin City was famous for its massive earthworks, known as the Walls of Benin. These walls, combined with a series of deep moats, were one of the largest man-made structures in the world at the time, stretching over 16,000 kilometers around the city and surrounding regions. The walls served both defensive and symbolic purposes. They were designed to protect the city from invaders and to demarcate the boundaries of the kingdom. The walls also signify the strength and organization of the Benin Empire. The walls were constructed by moving and piling vast quantities of earth, a feat that required considerable labour and organisation. The height of the walls varied, with the inner walls being taller and more formidable than those on the outer edges. Sculpture. These works from Benin are equal to the very finest of examples of European casting technique, wrote Professor Felix von Luchan, formerly the Berlin Ethnological Museum. The Kingdom of Benin was renowned for its artistic beauty. Bronze castings and carvings are important relics pointing to the kingdom's advanced bronze casting techniques. In Edo philosophy, the head is the seat of the guiding spiritual force. It is associated with the person's destiny, judgment, knowledge, intelligence, character, and leadership. Stylized commemorative altar heads are therefore powerful visual references to the spiritual authority and success of past Obas. The physical and spiritual strength of the reigning Oba is connected with the well-being of the entire kingdom. Royal ceremonies are performed in Benin City each year to spiritually strengthen the Oba. The bronzes were made with using the lost wax casting method, a sophisticated technique that allowed for highly detailed and intricate designs. The palace walls were adorned with intricate bas-reliefs and bronze plaques that depicted scenes from the kingdom's history, as well as images of the Oba, warriors, and deities. These artworks were not just decorative, but also served to communicate the power and divine right of the Oba. At the height of its greatness in the 12th century, well before the start of the European Renaissance, the kings and nobles of Benin City patronized craftsmen and lavished them with gifts and wealth, in return for their depiction of kings and dignitaries' great exploits in intricate bronze sculptures. Daily street life in Benin. What impressed the first visiting Europeans most was the wealth, artistic beauty, and magnificence of the city. There were large crowds through large streets, people dressed colourful in white, yellow, blue, and green. It was a place free of crime and hunger. Large streets and houses kept clean, the city filled with courteous, honest people, and run by centralised and highly sophisticated bureaucracy. Great Benin, where the king resides, is larger than Lisbon. All the streets run straight and as far as the eye can see. The houses are large, especially that of the king, richly decorated and has fine columns. The city is wealthy and industrious. It is so well governed that theft is unknown and people live in such security that they have no doors on their houses. In contrast, London at the same time is described by Bruce Holsinger, professor of English at University of Virginity, being a city of thievery, murder, bribery, and a thriving black market, making this medieval city ripe for exploitation for those with a skill and a quick blade or picking a pocket. On seeing the magnificence of the city, immediately European nations leapt at the opportunity to develop trade with the wealthy kingdom, importing ivory, palm oil, and pepper, and exporting guns. At the beginning of the 16th century, word spread quickly around Europe about the beautiful African city, and new visitors flocked in from all parts of Europe with ever-glowing testimonies recorded in numerous voyage notes and illustrations. Now, however, the Great Benin City is lost to history. Its decline began in the 15th century, sparked by internal conflicts linked with the increasing European intrusion and slavery trade at the borders of the empire. British imperial ambition for control over West African markets and territories led to increasing pressures on the Oba to open the Edo Kingdom to free trade with British commercial firms. Then, in 1897, the city was destroyed by British soldiers, who looted, blown up, and burned it to the ground. This led to the removal and the exile of the reigning Oba to be replaced by British overrule. With Nigerian independence in 1960, the Edo Kingdom was incorporated into the Nigerian state. Obas from the kingdom's ruling dynasty have retained their title and many cultural practices. The monarchy and its court rituals still provide a political and cultural focus in Benin City. Nowadays, there are not too many traces of the ancient city in Edo State. A lot of artifacts were stolen and can be found, of course, in the Benin bronze sculpture section of the British Museum in London. I really hope you enjoyed this video today. I found researching this topic incredibly fascinating, and I would love to know more about African fractals and African kingdoms too. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a video. I'll see you next time.